Welcome. This is the Senior Life Academy located on the campus of the University Park United Methodist Church here in Dallas, Texas. I'm Dee Dee Cassad, and today for our panel we're going to discuss evil. It's a challenging subject, but I think we're up for it. And my panel members are Miriam Mathis, Bob Monroe, Stephen Fleming, and Diana Wilson. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
I think first we need to probably ask the question, is there really evil in the world? What do you think, Diana?
I think that we're all pretty clear that there is. But the question is, if this is God's world, why is it? Why is there evil? How does God allow it? How can it be?
If he is all knowing and he's all powerful and he's all good, why is there evil?
How can that be?
How can that be? And the answer is?
The answer is people have been trying to figure that out since there have been people. That's true. It's an age-old question. The book of Job tries to address it. Some people get to the end of that book and they're not satisfied with the answer either. But I think it's worthwhile to distinguish between catastrophes, natural catastrophes.
That's right. There are several types of evil.
And evil which comes out of our own
The moral
hearts.
evil over against the natural evil, or even the metaphysical evil.
I really don't feel comfortable talking about hurricanes and other destructive natural events is evil.
Right.
That's
Evil sort of means that there is a bad motive,
right.
An intent.
an intent to do harm.
It's an intention.
Whereas natural events like earthquakes
They
and
can be
hurricanes,
genuine tragedies and catastrophes,
But they're not
there's no
defined.
There's
as
no
evil.
intent to
there's
cause
no
harm.
intent to it. That's true. That's true. Is that how you see it, Bob?
Well, we raised the question and talked about it. I think the word is so ambiguous it's lost its meaning. We have used it biblically in a number of ways, and we use it in frequent speech. We talk about people being evil. We talk about acts being evil. But then the acts, or whether the people committed evil, depends on the person who's making the accusation or putting the label.
Right.
For example, war is generally thought to be pretty bad. A lot of death and destruction over our history of mankind. But then in the Bible, there are instances where the chosen people were told to go to war and wipe out people. So if you were some of the people being wiped out, that was evil. If you were the ones doing the wiping out, then you were following God's orders. And we have find it used as a label, even in Christianity. Sometimes if someone doesn't agree with us, we might be called evil.
True.
So I find that the word is so ubiquitous, it's become almost meaningless, and you need to define what you're calling bad or immoral or against God's wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And people should more define it. But when we just say something is evil, to me it's really lost its direct meaning.
How do you feel about it, Mary?
Well, I go back to the old fact or opinion that we used to teach kids in school. When you read a text, is that fact or is that opinion? So you're saying that you think that our use of evil is really just an opinion that people throw out,
Quite often.
and as a label on things.
Quite often, yes. And if you, as in your opinion, for example, you think someone is evil or an act is evil, I think it needs to be defined. And what I ask myself is when I face God or Jesus, have I done something evil? Is that something they would approve of? And if we use that to judge what the label is put on others or in an act, I think that would help us.
So we're back to judgment, basically.
Yes.
Well, and,
but
and
then-
your feeling about what evil really is. So if we all agree that evil is in the world,
Yes.
all right, and that's how do then Christians deal with it?
But that's important also to recognize that not all humans agree with that. I mean, we're distinguished from Buddhism, at least in many ways, but of course by the idea that evil is not imaginary. Buddhism believes not that it's imaginary, but it's a figment of our imagination.
It's man-made.
Yeah, we have to, and we can withdraw from the world and find release from suffering and evil that way. But Jesus engages evil, and
Yes.
I think he names it and calls it out, and I think we're instructed by the one that we profess to call ourselves by his name that we're to do the same. And it does take discernment or judgment to be sure we're not just projecting all of our animosity somewhere else and saying that's
Right.
bad.
When we consider in our world, say, some countries that are evil or some political position is evil, how do Christians handle that?
I think that social justice is an important part of our faith. Is that we are to stand for the least of these people who are treated poorly,
Persecuted.
Persecuted.
and perhaps there's evil as part of that. So surely, I think one of you two said we need to name it, or maybe you did. We need to name things that are evil
Well, I think
in our sight, but we also have an obligation to try to help with the situation so that we're not part of the problem. I'd like to go back just a little bit because Bob was talking about defining evil. I think there's different ways of looking at evil. If you're talking about individual people, I was reading a book by Thomas Keating the other day, and he said we all have seeds, like seeds that grow trees. We all have seeds of evil, and it makes me think of the way our bodies are composed. We have this reptilian brain, and when we're fetuses, we have a tail. So we have instincts. We have physical attributes that all animals have, whether they're wildcats
and
or
survival
bears.
of the fittest type.
Right, and part of it's instinctive.
Sure.
And so I think that's where our faith comes in and helps us. Are we gonna go with being primitive and not having a higher level of consciousness, or are we going to listen to the person we follow? I mean, for sure we need to worship Jesus, but more than anything, we need to follow him and his way.
But in our generation, we had the Holocaust, and that has defined evil in an entirely different way. As I understand it, when you look at the Holocaust and the evil that was done there, you still have to ask, how then does a Christian handle something like that? We observe that. I've been to the camps, and it is unbelievable that happened. And the stories that you've read, Man's Search for Meaning, for instance, Viktor Frankl, and the fact that he ended up, the one thing you can't take away from me is my will to live. And so, this evil, though, from the Holocaust is certainly different from, the natural evil. The Ten Commandments also, if we look at the Ten Commandments, they give us sort of a guidelines of evil.
Well, I think the biggest thing and the simplest thing we should look at is what Jesus told us to do, which was to love our
Love the
neighbor and to, as you said in a couple of our sessions, take care of the poor and the unfortunate. And I mean, that's, to me, there's that old Hebrew legend, or maybe it's even in the Old Testament, I'm not sure, of the 10 just men who hold up the world. And I think that there are so many instances of people, even during the Holocaust, who saved children by hiding them, who
Oh, yeah.
did all kind, in the face of all that danger and that terrible oppressive evil. There are people in the world who courageously do the right thing and the honorable thing and the just thing, and we just have to be some of those people sometimes, and as much as we
we're
can.
always called to be that type of person.
Well, yeah, all the time.
Yeah, we are. We're called to do that. But how can we then avoid evil? How is it, even on a personal level? Because if we decided collectively, I think that there's a lot of intention that goes with it. Is it an intentional thing to do evil? How do we avoid activating the seeds?
Well, I would say that prayer would be a big part of it, and I don't know that we can do it by ourselves. I really think that we need the Holy Spirit to be with us and for us to trust that God is walking with us every
But
day.
do you feel that evil is, or Satan, or however you want to personalize it, is vying for your attention and for your commitment and for your? Do we believe that as Christians?
I personally don't, but I know there are people who do.
What do you think, Stephen?
Well, I think the concept of Satan is,
Or Lucifer?
or Lucifer, or the evil one, is a great way of illustrating the temptation that we face to be selfish, self-centered, and do something that might feel good or be easy to do instead of difficult. Paul identifies one of the fruits of the Spirit as self-control, though. And I think through prayer and other spiritual disciplines, we learn how to distinguish between, what is just in it for me and what is the greater good. I believe that's where it comes in. There's, and also just as you were talking about the Holocaust, I think individual evil can coalesce into corporate evil and a larger structure that really seems to have a power of its own.
It does.
Even if it doesn't really, it sure seems to, and it affects us
It
that
evidently
way.
does,
We're
because
drawn
thousands of
towards
people
it.
were.
Yeah, we're drawn towards it. But none of us is immune to it either. But I think Paul's exposition of his struggle with it in Romans 7 was just so great. Even for people who know what is good and want to do good, they struggle with the temptation not to.
And
At the end of the day, Paul says, "I don't even know who I am anymore." So,
Yeah, that's true. And intention, but also the fact that sometimes we have feelings of revenge. We want some revenge. Is revengefulness an evil? In other words, I think vengeance is mine, says the Lord. We don't do that, but there are a lot of times intentionally we would like, they did that to me. I'm going to get even.
I think what I've seen quite a bit of when people become incensed at something that bad happened, and things don't come out the way they want, or they want them to turn out a different way. On news media, we've seen a lot. People want justice. Well, they really don't want justice. They want revenge.
That's exactly.
Justice
Good point.
is different, and many people are hurting so badly or feel so strongly in a group. As Stephen said, group dynamics are different, and
we all have a lynch mob inside of us, don't we?
sometimes, yes. Maybe that's part of that reptilian brain that Diana mentioned. It is almost instinctive. I want revenge, but revenge is different than justice.
Is it evil?
I think revenge is something that would not be approved by Jesus. So from my view, trying to use what I know of Jesus' teaching, I would say revenge would be an evil act, or it would be an evil motive.
Because he has clearly said, you should not be, I'll take care of that.
And turn the other cheek, he said.
Turn the other cheek, right.
Which he did.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah, I think that's clear.
And even sometimes when that doesn't turn out in our so-called system of justice, I had a judge many years ago when a young man who came from a rich family in Austin, Texas, was drunk and killed 4 people in a crash, and his people got the arrest erased from the records. Everything got buried and disappeared, and people were saying, how bad that is, and they wanted it to come out differently, him to be at least go to a court of law. And the local judge told me, Bob, you have to understand that we are a nation of laws, and the law and justice are not the same. We hope they coincide.
But they don't always.
But not always does the law mean justice. And I've always remembered that.
Good lesson there. Good lesson there. Anybody else have any words of wisdom for me?
Well, yeah, I'd really like to say I think Freud and Jung were really on to something when they talked about how we're made up. And,
Our
and
psyche.
Jung especially was one to talk about the shadow side of us. And we really get in a jam when we try to think of ourselves as being good or becoming perfect, in the sense of rooting out all that evil within us. I don't think we can do it. I think we...
Not if there's seeds there.
No, and Jesus, when he was on the Sermon on the Mount, said, which one of you among you would, if his son asked for a loaf of bread, would give him a snake? And then he went on to say, so even those of you, even you who are not perfect, know how to do good things. So we're a mixture.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
And as soon as we start thinking we're above that or beyond that, we're really in trouble. And that's the roots of self-righteousness and
Yeah.
judgmentalism.
Well, even in the Enneagram teachings, you have your personality is built on really on a sin in a way. It's based. You're driven by one particular kind of bad motive, and you're also. That's also reflective of your what's
Gifts.
the gift in you. So
That's the two sides of the same coin.
exactly. I mean, that's a much better way to put it.
I was going to say there's the famous experiment that's been repeated over and over again that shows we are a social animal. We are an animal, and we are a social animal. And that social animal forms organizations that usually respects, doesn't blindly obey, but respects authority. So they've taken people, put them in a room, and told them there's a person who's done something very bad. They're on the other side of a glass, and they're hooked to a chair where they can get a shock. And there's a person that describes this in the control room, says, now, you should ask them a question, and if they don't tell the truth, and I'll tell you if they're telling the truth, then you turn the dial up and you press the button and give them a shock. I won't go and drag it on, but the numbers over and over again for 30 years, all different schools all over the Western Europe and United States show there is a certain amount of us, quite a high population, unfortunately, over 50%, that will go way over to pain, giving that person pain. some all the way to fatal.
Yeah.
Now, they're an actor, they're not getting really
No, sure.
shocked.
Yeah.
But some people will go all the way to fatal to follow authority. And there's something less than 10% or 15%. It's very small. I'm disappointed. And they tell, no, I'm not going to cause pain to this other person.
You know, there's a whole study on the evolution of consciousness. And really, that's what those studies are about, is how self-aware you are, how conscious you are of how you think, and what motivates you. And, you know, the basic level of consciousness is that primitive animal level. And then there's the tribal level, which was one of the first social groups we had. And what I see a lot in the papers today is a lot of tribalism. And it's all about me and mine and being great again and being safe and keeping others out, you know, not just it's about me and mine. And unless people learn, and Jesus was not a tribalist, he was a universalist. He loves everyone. And until you can have that kind of awareness, until we start teaching stuff like that in schools, where people learn about levels of consciousness, we're going to always have people pushing the button.
That's a very interesting comment. I think it's one that we can end on. Appreciate anybody that has thoughts on this subject. It's a very deep subject. It's a very challenging subject. We'd like to hear from you. Our email is on the bottom of your screen, and we'd love to hear from you. In the meanwhile, may God surround you with His grace.